Let's now get to the news in detail. Our top story: President Donald Trump says the U.S. is locked and loaded for a response to attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. He's also authorized the use of the U.S. emergency oil stockpile to ensure oil continues to flow after strikes closed 5% of global crude production. President Trump says there is reason to believe the U.S. knows the perpetrators of the attack. Rather than retaliate immediately, the president says he wants to learn the identity of the attackers from Saudi Arabia. Trump rejected reports he is still willing to meet Iran's President Hassan Rouhani unconditionally. The Saudi kingdom's two biggest oil installations were hit on Saturday by drone attacks claimed by Yemen's Houthi rebels. The strikes cut Saudi Arabia's oil production by half. Well, international oil prices have leapt 10% after Saudi oil production was halved by those drone strikes. Crude futures reached their highest levels since May, but steadied after the U.S. said it would release strategic oil reserves. Driven by fears the U.S. could attack Iran in response to those drone strikes, investors have piled into safe havens. Well, let's discuss all of that a bit further. We're joined now by James Dorsey, who is joining us now from Singapore. James, thank you for your time today. The rhetoric out of Washington, James, and Tehran has quickly escalated into a talk of war since these drone strikes. How close are we, do you think, to armed conflict?
I think it's still wait and see. As a matter of principle, none of the parties, Iran, the United States, or Saudi Arabia, want a full-fledged war. On the other hand, of course, this attack cannot go without a response. I think what you're seeing in terms of President Trump saying he's waiting for verification, you've had the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo already say that he believes that Iran is responsible, but no evidence was provided for that. So the Saudis, in their investigation, are going to have to come up with evidence of who really was responsible for this and whether it was the Iranians or the Houthis in Yemen.
And then, James, obviously the other permanent members of the UN security can possibly play a vital role here. How are they, do you think, going to react to the prospects of any military escalation?
Well, I think what you're going to see is that once the Americans and the Saudis have clearly established for themselves who they think was responsible for this and have some degree of evidence to back that up, you're going to see pressure, first of all, on the European Union to be more supportive of U.S. sanctions against Iran. The Chinese, the Russians clearly are going to oppose military action, but they're not the ones that are going to decide it. I don't think that either the Americans or the Saudis are going to look to the United Nations Security Council for approval of any military operation.
And as a final thought then, James, I'll know, of course, oil prices have hit the roof because of this disruption of Saudi production. Is this, do you think, a temporary spike, or will political risk premiums continue to drive up those prices?
Well, I do think that you'll see political risk being factored in to a greater extent than it has been in the past into the oil price. Whether or not we're going to see this kind of spike in oil prices that we've seen in the last 12 to 24 hours is really going to depend on how this all unfolds. And on that, frankly, your guess is as good as mine.
All right, James, we appreciate it today. That was James Dorsey speaking to us there from Singapore. We're going to go now into a very short break. The news will continue right after. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us, viewers. News just we're receiving here at Indus News, that India's Supreme Court has issued a verdict about the illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir by the BJP government. Also, the ex-chief minister of that region, Farooq Abdullah, has been arrested. To discuss that further and to get the latest on that story, we're joined now by our correspondent, Rebecca Bundan, who is joining us now from Mumbai. Rebecca, thank you for your time today. The verdict, Rebecca, is a bit interestingly worded. It says normalcy must be restored in occupied Kashmir selectively. That's self-contradictory in a sense, isn't it? Can you explain a bit about that?
So what they're saying is the Supreme Court has said that normalcy does have to be restored in the region. They want to see schools opening, hospitals operating, and life returning to normal, because since August the 5th, there has been this lockdown. Obviously, things have not been as normal, but there's been a blackout of communications. A number of people have been under house arrest. People have been detained. People have not been freely moving about. Media coverage has not been freely facilitated, which has been a complaint of many media outlets. A lot of information just isn't freely moving around. So this has been a major concern since Kashmir's special status was revoked on August 5th by the Indian government. So the Supreme Court, now having heard these pleas, is saying that normalcy does have to be returned, but it's also recognising that this is an abnormal, exceptional set of circumstances, and that there is the issue of there's national interest, concerns about security, and so on. And that's why it's saying that although restrictions, it's implying, have to be eased, that can't necessarily all be done in one go. It's saying it has to be done on a selective basis, suggesting that perhaps things have to be monitored quite closely to see that the violence, any potential outbreaks of violence are minimised and so on. So I think that seems to be the issue here.
Okay, and if you can confirm first also, Rebecca, that the Chief Justice is to actually visit occupied Kashmir, and what is the purpose of that visit? Because, you know, if we're to understand that this visit is meant to understand what's occurring on the ground, there has been a lot of international reporting already about that, and even domestic reporting, mind you, about what the realities are on the ground. Just explain that as well for us, please.
Well, it has been suggested that there might be a visit by the Chief Justice, and that's largely because there have been these complaints that the high courts of Jammu and Kashmir, that people perhaps aren't getting the access that they want. In particular, there was an activist that filed a plea that came up today, and that was an issue that highlighted. And the Supreme Court, you know, has said that that's something it takes effectively. It's saying that it's something that it takes very seriously, and if it needs to do so, it would visit the region. It's also suggested that some of the cases should actually be heard locally. Like, for example, the editor of the Kashmir Times has complained that they're not being allowed to effectively, because of communication restrictions, movement restrictions, they're not being able to report properly on the matter in Kashmir, and that's one of the pleas one of the petitions that came up. And in that case, the Supreme Court did suggest, well, you know, is this a local issue, and is it something that should be heard by the Jammu and Kashmir High Court rather than the Supreme Court? But then obviously they need to make sure that those cases are being heard properly in the region, and now that's something that's definitely going to be looked into from what we've heard from what's come out of the Supreme Court today.
And then just before I let you go, Rebecca, as I'd mentioned in my intro to the interview to you, ex-Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah has been arrested, along with the limits placed on other leaders in occupied Kashmir. What is the message being sent here? How will this affect that already volatile situation in that region?
This is quite significant. That case of Farooq Abdullah, the former chief minister, is being covered quite widely by the Indian media, and it really highlights a point that's been quite worrying for a lot of people, and critics have highlighted this problem that there have been a number of people that have been detained in Kashmir, a number of political leaders, activists, and so on since the special status of Kashmir was revoked on August the 5th. And Farooq Abdullah, one of them, seems to have been under house arrest since then. So this has been a significant matter that's highlighting that that issue that a lot of people are actually concerned about. Now, this comes under the Public Safety Act, and under that, it is actually legal, really, for India for those people to be detained for up to 2 years without a trial. But obviously, that's a worrying situation in itself. If so many people are being detained in the region, and can they be held for that amount of time? That's a real worry for a lot of people, a lot of activists, and obviously for those people in that situation. If it's something that can go on for 2 years, that people can be detained without a trial, that's no small thing in itself.
Very well, Rebecca. We'll leave it there at that. But of course, we do appreciate your reporting for us. That was Rebecca speaking to us there from Mumbai. Let's move on with the news and remain in the region. Indian troops have martyred 3 unarmed youth in occupied Kashmir amid the ongoing lockdown there. Occupation forces martyred 2 youth during a cordon and search operation in the Kathua district. The 3rd youth was martyred in Jammu city. Kashmiri media say the killing of 2 happened during an encounter staged by Indian security forces. It reported that Indian police in Jammu tortured the 3rd martyr to death. Meanwhile, the Welfare Party of India says 40,000 Kashmiris have been arrested since August 5th, when India revoked the valley's special status. Let's now get to some other news. The presidents of Turkey, Russia and Iran will convene in Ankara today to discuss the conflict in Syria. The 3 countries are the guarantors of the Astana process to bring about a political settlement to that war. Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin of Russia, and Iran's Hassan Rouhani will discuss proposals to halt fighting in the northern Idlib province. The 3 presidents will talk about reinstating the safe zone in the rebel-held province and increasing humanitarian aid to civilians trapped there. Their dialogue will also focus on forming a constitutional committee to find a political solution after the end of the war. The Astana process was launched by Russia, Turkey, and Iran in the capital of Kazakhstan in January 2017. On to Libya now, where the government has accused Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces of killing dozens of civilians in the city of Tarhuna. In a statement, the government condemned what it calls crimes against the people of the city. It is demanding that the international community and UN Security Council immediately work to stop such violations. Tarhuna is 90 kilometers south of Tripoli and is controlled by Khalifa Haftar's LNA forces. The fighting there has escalated after the GNA Air Force claimed it killed 3 senior LNA commanders in airstrikes. Haftar's forces launched their renewed bid called Operation Dignity to capture the capital, Tripoli, last week. Meanwhile, 2 anti-establishment candidates have claimed victory with the unofficial results of Tunisia's presidential elections. The 61-year-old law professor Kais Said says he is in pole position. Abdel Fattah Mourou has come in a close second, while jailed media mogul Nabil Karoui also claims he has qualified for the second round of voting. The Election Commission reported a relatively low turnout at 45%, down from 64% in 2014. Official results will be announced tomorrow. A runoff vote will be held in November if nobody secures an absolute majority. The death of President Beji Caid Essebsi in July forced the elections to be held 3 months earlier than planned. Parliamentary elections are scheduled to take place in October. "36 people are feared drowned after a boat on the Congo River sank near the capital, Kinshasa. Police say 76 out of 102 passengers on board have been rescued. The whaleboat was traveling to Kinshasa from Mai-Ndombe province when it capsized 100 kilometers from the capital. Police say a rescue operation and investigation are underway. Lake and river transport is widely used in the Democratic Republic of Congo because of its poor highways. In the vast majority of accidents, passengers are not equipped with life jackets, and many cannot swim. Moving to the UK now, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he can strike a Brexit deal in the next few weeks. In an interview, Johnson expressed optimism that he could reach a final agreement before an EU summit on October 17th. He reiterated his vow to take the UK out of the EU by October 31st, with or without a deal. Johnson will meet European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and the EU's Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier today. The meeting in Luxembourg will see Johnson undertake his first Brexit negotiations since becoming Prime Minister in July. Ahead of those talks, Johnson said the next few days will be key to his chances of securing an amended Brexit deal. Britain's Liberal Democrat Party has formally decided to stop the country from leaving the EU if it comes to power in a general election. Members of the party conference in Bournemouth voted overwhelmingly to support a motion to revoke Article 50. It says a Liberal Democrat majority government would be recognized as an unequivocal mandate to revoke Article 50 and for the UK to stay in the EU. The party only holds 18 seats in Britain's 650-seat parliament, but has cast itself as the only Stop Brexit party. Liberal Democrats are hoping to pick up votes from the 16 million who voted to remain in the EU in 2016. Meanwhile, a group of environmental activists from the Extinction Rebellion have stopped traffic and protested near the venue for the London Fashion Week. Activists briefly blocked roads near Britain's Parliament in Westminster, holding banners comparing fashion to ecocide. The protesters say fashion should be more in tune with our times. The Extinction Rebellion wants non-violent civil disobedience to force governments to cut carbon emissions. More than 30,000 cyclists have taken part in a mass bike ride, in Russia's capital, Moscow. The ride was organized in a bid to promote cycling in the city, which is home to more than 3 million bicycles. This report has more.
On a warm autumn day, riders heading for the cycling festival arrived in the city centre early in the morning. Some came dressed in uniforms, brought instruments and took their children along. Muscovites have taken to the bicycle for a range of reasons, but for many it's a way of avoiding Moscow's notoriously tough traffic.
The weather is good, the spirits are high, so we decided to raise mood for everyone, ourselves included.
The event marks 8 years since the city's first cycling track was created. Cycling has become increasingly popular in Moscow as more protected bike lanes have been laid down in recent years.
Well, globally, people are on the lookout for new ways that could help relieve their muscle and joint pains. After acupuncture and dry needling, fire seems to be the new remedy in the market. How it's done? Watch this report.
An Egyptian masseur plays with fire to relieve his client's muscle pain at his spa in the Nile Delta Governorate of Gharbeya. 35-year-old Abdel Rahim Syed applies the ancient pharaonic technique called the fiery towel by starting with a standard massage using oil and chamomile followed by heat. This helps stimulate blood circulation and alleviate some of the pain-affected areas.
It is a type of massage which is called fiery massage. It means rubbing. I communicate with the human body, coming to close contact with the body of the human in front of me.
After placing several layers of towels and other isolating materials onto the client's back, an alcohol-soaked towel is placed on top and set alight. This fiery fabric burns for roughly a minute before the flames are put out with a wet towel.
My condition improved 100%, thank God. Before, I could not stand up to pray. I couldn't stretch my back when I get out of the car. Now, after the second session, my body is getting better and my movement is better. I used to be lazy, but this is no longer the case.
While proven to be beneficial, this technique cannot be used on people with high blood pressure, kidney failure or haemophilia. Syed has been trained in Morocco by an expert in the fiery towel technique, and he's won a fistful of certificates from Egyptian institutions.
Let's now get to some business news. Around 50,000 workers have begun a strike at America's biggest car maker, General Motors. The United Auto Workers Union walked out after failing to reach an agreement over pay and conditions with manufacturers. About 200 plant-level union leaders voted unanimously in favor of a strike. One of the biggest sticking points is GM's decision to close 4 car assembly plants in the U.S. This is the first major stoppage at GM since 2007. Elsewhere, Asia's financial markets are trading mixed amid political turmoil in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng Index has lost 1% after another weekend of unrest in Hong Kong. The Shanghai Composite is down a fraction after China reported a further slowdown in industrial production and retail sales. Gold prices have lifted by 1%, while silver has climbed over 2%. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this news bulletin here at Indus News.